At a red light, a billionaire gave a poor little girl $20, and she whispered, "You look just like my daddy." One photo froze his blood. One secret shattered his past. What began as kindness became a truth that rewrote an entire family forever. Silas Crow hated red lights. They were tiny, ordinary dictators, one glowing dot that forced his black coupe to kneel with everyone else. Every time it happened, the world pressed its fingerprints on his glass. He checked his watch. 9:42 a.m. The investor briefing began in 18 minutes. He preferred arriving early enough to look inevitable. The intersection at Mariner and Fifth boiled in coastal heat. Horns, buses exhaling, a billboard smiling down like it knew secrets. That's when he saw her. A little girl 6, maybe threading between bumpers like she'd been born in the narrow space between danger and hunger. A spray bottle in one hand, a cloth in the other. A faded yellow t-shirt clinging to her small frame denim shorts, too big, cinched by a knot, like a promise that didn't hold. Her hair was tied into 2 uneven braids. Messy, determined. Not cute messy, survival messy. Silas's thumb hit the lock button. Click, reflex. He didn't do approach. He didn't do messy stories at stoplights. He did clean numbers, clean deals, clean endings. The girl moved with careful professionalism, wiping a minivan windshield in slow, precise arcs. Not begging, not performing. Working. The light switched. Green. Cars lurched, then stalled because the driver ahead stared at their phone like it was scripture. Green died. Red returned. Silas exhaled through his nose the way he did when the universe disappointed him. The girl glanced up and smiled at him through his tinted glass, bright, real, almost grateful. That bothered him more than the honking. She stepped closer, spray bottle raised, her mouth-shaped words against the window. Silas pretended to read an email, again her lips. Clearer. He lowered the window 2 inches, just enough to hear her voice without letting the world all the way in. "Can I clean your window, mister?" Her voice was small but steady, like she'd practiced being brave. Silas didn't look at the windshield. He reached for his wallet. A crisp bill. $20. More than most people handed to children at intersections. More than he'd ever thought about for longer than a second. "You don't have to clean it," he said, holding it out. "This is for you." Her eyes widened. Not greedy. Shocked, like she'd been handed a piece of another planet. 20, she whispered. "Wow. Thank you." She took it carefully, folding it like it might break. Silas checked his watch again. The light stayed red, and the world stayed waiting. The girl didn't run away. She didn't bounce to the next car like a bird chasing crumbs. She leaned closer, close enough for Silas to see the faint smudge of dirt on her cheek and the thinness of her wrists. Close enough to see she was fighting adulthood far too early. Her gaze climbed his face slowly, as if reading it. Then her eyes snapped wide. "Wait." Silas's polite mask lifted by a millimeter. "What?" She pointed at him with the hand holding the cloth. You look like my daddy." Silas forced a thin smile. People said things. People always tried to hook their need onto his attention. "That's nice," he said, ready to roll the window back up. But she dug into her pocket like she was pulling out evidence. A crumpled photograph, cheap paper, folded and unfolded too many times. A picture that had been loved hard. "You have to look," she insisted, holding it up with both hands. "This is my daddy. You're the same." Silas glanced out of courtesy, and the city dropped out from under him. The man in the photo sat on a worn couch, the girl perched on his knee, both smiling like they had nothing and still somehow had each other. The man's face, Silas's face. Not kind of, not close, not maybe. Same eyes, same jawline, same dark hairline, same little scar above the right eyebrow like a punctuation mark. Silas stopped breathing. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel until the leather complained. The world sounded far away, horns, engines, the ocean wind, like someone turned down the volume on reality. "Where did you get this?" he asked, and his voice didn't sound like him. "It's my daddy," she said proudly. "His name is Gideon." Gideon. Silas stared at the photo again, searching for the lie. There wasn't one. The light turned green. A chorus of horns rose behind him like anger. Silas's car crept forward, still trapped by the vehicle ahead. His hands didn't feel attached to his arms. The girl, still smiling, tilted her head. "What's your name?" Silas swallowed glass. "Silas." "I'm Maisie," she said. "Maisie Hart." "Elizabeth is my full name, but everyone says Maisie." He handed the photo back like it was burning him. Maisie tucked it away with the seriousness of someone protecting treasure. "Bye, mister," she chirped. "Thanks for the money." Silas hit the gas the moment the lane cleared, shooting through the intersection as if he could outrun what he'd just seen. But the image clung to him, a mirror he'd never asked for, and a question that cracked his life clean in half. By the time Silas reached the glass tower of Crow Arcadia Systems, his hands were steady again. That was his gift, his curse, control. He parked in his reserved spot like nothing had happened. Rode the private elevator like he wasn't carrying a ghost in his chest. But inside his skull, the photo kept flashing. That couch, that smile, that scar. Not a resemblance, a duplication. In the boardroom, investors laughed at his jokes. He delivered projections like a machine that printed confidence. He answered questions, closed the deal, signed the future. No one saw the fracture behind his eyes. No one noticed his fingers tapping the same 4 beats over and over against the table. 4 words. Take. Good. Care. Of. Him. He didn't know why those words surfaced. He just knew they did. When the meeting ended, Silas returned to his office, shut the door, and stood in silence, facing the panoramic window, Harbor Vale spread beneath him like an obedient map. He whispered, "Impossible." But his voice shook. And then, like a locked drawer finally sliding open, his childhood returned in a sharp, unwanted burst, 7 years old. Alone in his mother's room. Fingers digging through a jewelry box, a folded yellow paper, a sentence written in careful handwriting. Take good care of him. Silas closed his eyes. The world didn't tilt. It rearranged. He called his assistant without sitting down. "Rena," he said, voice level by force. "Cancel everything after noon." There was a pause. "Sir, the board review, cancel it." Another pause, careful now. "Is everything okay?" Silas stared at his own reflection in the black glass of the window. A man made of polish. A man built for headlines. A family emergency, he said. The words tasted unfamiliar, like speaking a language he'd never respected. 30 minutes later, his driver pulled into the gated estate where Silas had been raised, white stone-clipped hedges, fountains that never seemed to run out of water. His adoptive mother, Celeste, would be in the sunroom with her rare orchids. His adoptive father, Reed, would be reading the financial section like it was scripture. Silas walked in without warning because warning meant preparation, and preparation meant lies. In the sunroom, the air was humid and sweet with expensive plants. Celeste looked up first. Silas Reed lowered his newspaper. Did something happen at the company? Always the company first. Silas didn't sit. Standing felt safer. Like if he sat down, the truth might pin him to the floor. "I need to talk about something personal." Celeste's gloved hand tightened around a spray mister. Reed adjusted his glasses, the smallest tells of people who had lived a lifetime rehearsing calm. Silas watched them, then spoke like a blade. "I met a child today," he said. "She showed me a photo of her father." Celeste smiled too quickly, and Silas stepped forward, voice dropping. "He has my face." Silence. The irrigation system ticked softly somewhere behind the orchids. Reed's throat moved when he swallowed. Lots of people resemble each other. No, Silas said. Not like this. He held up his hand and pointed to the scar above his eyebrow. He has this too. Celeste's hand flew to her pearls. Reed stood up, setting his newspaper down too carefully. Silas's heart began to pound. He asked the question that had waited in him for 34 years like a splinter. Am I adopted? Celeste's lips parted. Reed didn't deny it. That was the answer. Celeste's voice broke softly. Please, sit down. Silas sat because his legs suddenly didn't belong to him. Reed's jaw tightened, then loosened like surrender. Yes, Reed said. You were adopted. The words landed heavy. Not surprising. Just final. Silas felt empty and full at the same time. Why didn't you tell me, he asked, and he hated how young his voice sounded. Celeste's eyes glistened. We wanted to protect you. From what Reed leaned forward, from the pain of feeling unwanted. Silas laughed once short, sharp, humorless. Too late. Celeste spoke first, voice trembling with practiced elegance cracking at the edges. We tried for years, she said. Treatments, specialists, everything. Reed's hand covered hers, but his fingers were stiff. Then one night, Reed continued, someone rang the bell. Silas watched his father's mouth form words like a confession. I opened the door, and there was a basket. Silas's stomach clenched. A basket. Celeste nodded, tears tracking down carefully maintained makeup. A wicker basket, and inside, a baby. Silas didn't blink. Reed's voice was quiet now. You, a note, Silas asked, already knowing. Celeste wiped her cheek. Yes. 4 words written on a small folded paper yellowed by time. Take good care of him. Silas felt like the air had turned to water. You called the police, he asked. We did, Reed said. They investigated. Nothing. Celeste added. By the time anyone suggested formal placement, we couldn't let you go. Reed stared at the floor like it might forgive him. We used lawyers, connections. We made it legal. Silas's hands curled into fists in his lap. His entire life, private tutors, gated schools, charity galas, polished photographs had begun as a baby left outside like a secret nobody wanted to claim. And you never told me, he whispered. Celeste leaned forward. We loved you. From the first second. Silas believed that, which made the betrayal worse. He turned his head slightly. Did you ever find who left me? Reed shook his head. No record, no leads. Celeste's voice softened, pleading. We thought it was kinder if you didn't grow up chasing ghosts. Silas stood up slowly. Outside sunlight hit the manicured garden like it was proud of itself. His voice came out steady, but his eyes burned. Today I saw one of those ghosts, he said. And he looks exactly like me. Reed's face tightened. What are you going to do? Silas didn't hesitate. I'm going to find him. Celeste rose, reaching for him. Silas. He stepped back, not cruelly, just urgently. I have to know who I am, he said. Even if it destroys what you built, Reed's voice turned careful. And if it opens wounds that should stay closed. Silas looked at them, the people who raised him, who fed him safety, but starved him truth. I'm not 7 anymore, he said. I can survive pain. Then he left, and for the first time in his perfect scheduled life, he drove without knowing where the road would end. 3 days. 3 days of no sleep, no appetite, no peace. Silas returned to the intersection at Mariner and 5th like a man visiting a crime scene where the victim was his identity. He didn't bring the coupe. Too loud, too obvious. He parked blocks away and walked under the sharp coastal sun suit jacket folded over one arm collar, open like he had forgotten how to breathe as a normal human. He waited. He watched. He counted cars. Counted minutes. Counted the way his heart refused to slow down. Street vendors argued over space. A busker played the same sad melody until it became a bruise, and then movement. A small figure slipped between lanes, faded yellow shirt, two messy braids. Silas's chest tightened. Maisie. She cleaned an SUV windshield with the same careful, methodical devotion. Not for pity, for survival, as if doing it well could protect her from what she couldn't control. Silas approached slowly, hands visible, voice gentle. "Hi, Maisie." She spun around, and her face lit up like a porch light. "It's the money man," she blurted. Then she squinted. "The one who looks like my daddy." Silas couldn't help the small broken sound that escaped him, almost a laugh, almost a sob. "You remember me?" "Of course," she said. $20 is like 100 cookies." She lifted her spray bottle. "Do you want me to clean your window again? I'm on foot today," he said. "But, are you hungry?" Maisie's smile faltered. Suspicion moved across her small features like a practiced shield. "I can't go," she said. "I have to work. Daddy needs the money." Silas nodded, respecting her fear, respecting the fact that the world had taught her to be careful. "What if we eat right there?" he offered, pointing to a diner across the street with sun-faded signs. "You can see the intersection the whole time." Maisie stared, then whispered, as if afraid the universe might overhear and punish her for wanting. "Can I pick anything?" "Anything," Silas said. "Even a chocolate milkshake." Her face cracked open into pure joy, fast, bright, almost painful to witness. "Especially a chocolate milkshake," she said, and for 1 second she looked like a child instead of a worker. She hid her bottle and cloth behind a trash can like it was a stash spot she'd used 100 times. Then she took Silas's hand. The touch hit him like electricity. Not manipulative, not strategic. Trust, raw, reckless, undeserved. Inside the diner, the waitress looked at Silas's expensive watch and Maisie's worn clothes and didn't hide her confusion. Silas didn't care. Maisie climbed onto the booth and held the menu like it was sacred. "I've never eaten in a real restaurant," she confessed. Silas's chest tightened. "Never." She shook her head, then lowered her voice. "Daddy says it costs too much. We eat at home." When the milkshake arrived, Maisie drank like she was afraid it might disappear. A chocolate mustache formed above her lip. Silas watched it and thought, "How many times has she gone to bed hungry?" he asked softly. "Your mom." Maisie's joy flickered. "Mommy's in heaven," she said. "Daddy says she became a star when I was born." Silas swallowed. "I'm sorry," he said. Maisie shrugged like she'd had to grow used to sorry. "It's okay," she said. "Daddy stays." After the burger, Maisie saved a French fry in her pocket. Silas saw it, and his heart broke cleanly in two. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. "You can eat it all." Maisie's eyes dropped. "Sometimes we don't have much at home," she admitted, words small as crumbs. "Daddy says we gotta make it last until the end of the month." Silas nodded, jaw tight. He didn't ask more questions like an interrogator. He asked like a man trying not to shatter. Maisie told him about pasta nights, a broken shower, a landlord who yelled, a father who cried when he thought she couldn't see, and Silas, who had grown up in rooms bigger than this diner, felt something inside him change shape. When Maisie finished her dessert, Silas took a breath. "I'd really like to meet your dad," he said. Maisie blinked, then studied him the way children do when they can sense the truth hiding behind adult words. "Why? Because he might be my twin. Because my whole life might be a lie. Because your father might be the missing half of my beginning." Silas chose the version her heart could hold. "Because I think we might be related," he said. Maisie's face scrunched up in serious thought. "Is that why you look the same?" Maybe, Silas whispered. She considered the logic like it was math. "Daddy will like you," she decided. "He's nice, but he gets sad sometimes." Silas paid the bill. Left a tip so big the waitress blinked twice. Outside, Maisie grabbed her hidden supplies, stuffed them into a worn backpack, and took his hand again, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "This way," she said, tugging him forward. "We gotta cross the park." They walked under trees that threw shifting shadows like hands over their faces. Maisie chattered about her favorite swing, the squirrel she once saw the big window in their apartment, where morning sun made everything feel less poor. Silas listened, but every step made his pulse louder, because every step moved him closer to the moment he couldn't unsee. They reached an old brick building, peeling paint, a broken elevator sign that looked permanent. "Third floor," Maisie said brightly. "The stairs are scary, but I'm brave." Silas looked up at the dark stairwell and felt a fear he hadn't tasted since childhood. Not fear of losing money. Fear of losing himself. Maisie squeezed his hand once, like courage was something she could lend. "Daddy's gonna be so surprised," she said. Silas swallowed. So was he. The third-floor hallway smelled like old paint and warm dust, the kind of scent that clung to your clothes and told the truth about a building no one fixed anymore. Maisie skipped ahead, like the darkness couldn't touch her. "We're here," she announced, proud as if she owned the whole cracked world. Silas stood outside the apartment door for a beat too long, listening. A muffled TV. A refrigerator hum that sounded tired. Somewhere inside, life moved in small, careful steps. Maisie knocked once, then pushed in like she'd been gone 5 minutes, not a lifetime. "Daddy." The apartment was small, smaller than Silas's walk-in closet back at his penthouse, but it was clean. Not showroom clean, lived-in clean. A colorful blanket draped over a ripped sofa like dignity trying to cover hardship. Children's drawings taped to the wall in crooked rows, stick figures, suns, hearts, a house with a giant window. Maisie yanked a shoebox from a shelf and flipped the lid. "Look, my toys." She held up a doll made from a plastic bottle yarn hair, a face drawn with marker. The stitches on its dress were uneven, stubborn, handmade. Silas took it carefully, as if it were fragile gold. "This one is Mrs. Marina," Maisie said. "And this is Mr. T. Tobias. And this—" She lifted a smaller bottle doll with a serious little grin. "This is Daddy." Silas's throat tightened. Even in bottle plastic and ink, the doll captured something unmistakable: broad shoulders, dark hair, a little mark above the eyebrow. A key turned in the lock. Maisie's whole body sprang up like a firework. Daddy's home. Silas rose on instinct, smoothing his shirt, adjusting his open collar, as if he were about to walk into a board meeting instead of a moment that could split his life in half. The door opened. Gideon Hart stepped inside, carrying a grocery bag in one hand and a battered toolbox in the other. Faded jeans, gray t-shirt, the fatigue of a man who worked too hard for too little, etched around his eyes. He looked down, smiling at Maisie, then looked up. Time stopped. Silas felt it an actual halt, like the world's lungs emptied all at once. It wasn't like the photo. The photo hadn't prepared him for the living mirror. The same eyes, the same jaw, the same hairline, the same scar above the right eyebrow, like a signature. Gideon's fingers loosened. The grocery bag sagged. The toolbox bumped the floor with a dull, final thud. His voice came out as a whisper that didn't belong in a grown man's mouth. "Who are you?" Silas couldn't move. It was like meeting himself if his life had chosen pain instead of privilege. Maisie looked between them, fascinated. "See, I told you," she chirped like she'd introduced two friends at a playground. Gideon didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked on Silas, as if blinking might make the vision disappear. "Maisie," Gideon said, and his voice was careful now, too calm the way men sound when they're trying not to scare their children. "Sweetheart, go to your room for a minute, okay? I need to talk. But I want to please." That word carried weight. Maisie pouted, but she obeyed, dragging her shoebox like a stubborn pet. At the door, she turned back. "I want to know everything later." "I promise," Gideon said without looking away from Silas. The bedroom door clicked shut. Silence rushed in and filled every corner of the apartment. Gideon swallowed hard, then forced motion into his arms. He picked up the toolbox, set the grocery bag on the counter. Normal actions, survival actions. Coffee, he offered, voice tight. I have coffee. Silas nodded once, grateful for anything that wasn't staring. Gideon moved around the tiny kitchen like a man operating through fog, measuring grounds, filling a chipped kettle. His hands trembled slightly, and he hid it by turning his back. Silas remained standing in the living room, absorbing everything: the patched curtain, the notebooks stacked neatly on a wobbly table, the tiny backpack by the door, with Maisie's spray bottle tucked inside like a weapon she shouldn't need. Gideon spoke without turning around. Is this some kind of joke, some show? Because if it is, it isn't, Silas said. His voice sounded like it came from a stranger's throat. I wish it was. Gideon turned slowly, eyes scanning Silas's face as if searching for a seam, something that proved this was a mask. Then Gideon pointed, sharp and sudden. The scar. Silas's fingers flew up instinctively, touching the thin line above his right eyebrow. Gideon's voice broke. You have it too, Silas nodded, throat burning. I've had it as long as I can remember. Me too, Gideon whispered. Coffee started to brew, the sound oddly loud in the stillness. They sat on opposite ends of the worn sofa like magnets, afraid of snapping together. Gideon held a chipped mug with both hands. Silas accepted the unchipped one like it mattered. Gideon's stare didn't soften. He went straight for the heart of it. Are you adopted? Silas exhaled slowly. Yes. Gideon's mouth twitched, half laugh, half pain. Of course. Silas leaned forward. And you? Gideon nodded once. I've always known. My mom, my adoptive mom, she never hid it. Silas's stomach turned. I just found out 3 days ago. Gideon's eyes narrowed. Because of the photo. Yes, Silas admitted. Maisie showed me and I. He stopped because words couldn't hold it. I couldn't unsee you. Gideon stared into his coffee like the black surface might answer. Then tell me, Gideon said, voice low, dangerous with disbelief. How does a man end up with my face? Gideon's jaw tightened. My mom told me I was found in a basket, he said, like he hated himself for saying something so ridiculous out loud. On a park bench. Like a forgotten thing. Silas's spine went cold. A basket, Silas repeated. Gideon nodded, swallowing. There was a note. Silas didn't blink. What did it say? Gideon's voice dropped, almost reverent. Take good care of him. Silas's hands went numb. For a moment, neither man spoke. They just sat there with the same face in the same room, the same 4 words hanging between them like a noose. Silas's voice came out thin. I was found in a basket too. Gideon's eyes snapped up. No. Silas nodded once. On my adoptive parents' doorstep. Same note. The air seemed to compress. Gideon's breathing turned shallow fast. Then where Gideon began. Brother Silas finished the word, tasting unfamiliar and inevitable. Maybe twins. Gideon's laugh came out sharp and broken. Twins. He rubbed a hand over his face. Like those movies no one believes. Silas watched him, this version of himself carved by struggle, and felt something ugly and honest rise in his chest. Guilt, fear, longing, and a strange protective anger at the universe. The bedroom door creaked. Maisie peeked out, eyes bright with curiosity. Can I come back now? Gideon's expression softened instantly, fatherhood snapping into place like armor. Come here, Peanut. Maisie ran in and climbed onto the sofa, wedging herself in the middle as if her small body could hold the 2 worlds apart. She looked up at Gideon proudly. I told you. Same face means family. Gideon's hand slid into Maisie's hair. Yeah, he murmured. Looks like you were right. Maisie turned to Silas, studying him with serious eyes. So, you're my uncle. The word hit Silas in the chest like a door finally opening. I guess I am, Silas said softly. Maisie smiled like she'd been gifted a new planet. Uncle Silas. That sounds fancy. Gideon exhaled a slow breath, still stunned. We need to take this slow, Maisie. Uncle Silas and we just met. Maisie's face fell, worry flashing fast. But he'll come back, right? Silas looked at Gideon, saw pride, fear, the instinct to protect his child from disappointment. Silas didn't make promises lightly. Promises were contracts. Promises were weapons. But this one felt like truth. I'll be back, Silas said, voice steady. I promise. Maisie nodded, satisfied, then leaned against Gideon like the world made sense again. Gideon stared at Silas over his daughter's head. His voice was low. What do we do now? Silas's pulse thundered. He had built an empire out of certainty, and now certainty had a twin. I think Silas said we start at the beginning. The weeks that followed didn't feel like weeks. They felt like Silas stepping through a door that had always been there, hidden behind money. 3 nights a week, he parked blocks away and walked to Gideon's building. At first, he told himself it was to avoid attention. Later, he realized he liked the anonymous walk, the smell of street food, the sound of ordinary laughter, the way life happened without a concierge guarding the entrance. The first time he showed up with grocery bags, Gideon's shoulders stiffened like a man bracing for an insult. We don't need charity, Gideon said, voice firm, eyes hard. Silas set the bags down gently. Fresh fruit, meat, vegetables, the kind of food Maisie shouldn't have to dream about. It's not charity, Silas replied. It's what families do. The word families landed heavy. Gideon didn't argue, but his pride didn't relax either. Pride was how he'd kept his spine straight when everything else bent. Maisie didn't have pride. She had wonder. She danced around the groceries like Christmas. Strawberries, she squealed. Daddy, strawberries are expensive. Gideon shot Silas a warning look. Silas nodded, backing off. He learned quickly help was a language Gideon didn't speak easily. Silas found another way in. He brought notebooks, colored pencils, children's books, small things that didn't feel like pity, just possibility. On a rainy Tuesday, Silas arrived, drenched suit jacket dark with water. Maisie didn't care. She launched herself into his arms like gravity was optional. Uncle Silas, she yelled. Did you bring more books? Silas pulled an illustrated storybook from his briefcase and watched her face light up like dawn. I did. That night, they sat at the small kitchen table while Gideon stirred a pot of pasta. Silas drew letters in thick marker. Maisie copied them with fierce concentration, tongue sticking out at the corner of her mouth like a tiny warrior. B, C, she whispered. Silas watched her hand, small but determined. She learned fast, not because she had resources, but because she had hunger for more than food. Now write your name, Silas said gently. Maisie grinned and spelled slowly. I-S-I-E, perfect, Silas said. Then without being asked, Maisie wrote another word in careful, shaky letters, U-N-C-L-E-S-I-L-A-S. Silas's chest tightened. It was the first time his name had been written like something loved, not something printed on a business card. From the kitchen, Gideon watched them, a guarded softness crossing his face before he could hide it. You're good with her, Gideon muttered. Silas didn't look up. She's good at learning, he answered. And in that tiny kitchen under cheap light, Silas realized something terrifying. He wanted this. He wanted to belong. Dinner was simple pasta with sauce. Gideon stretched to last vegetables. Silas had brought bread warmed in a pan because the oven was unreliable. Silas had eaten meals that cost more than Gideon's monthly rent. Michelin-starred plates arranged like art. But this tasted like something he'd been starving for his whole life. After dinner, Gideon washed dishes. Maisie padded into the living room in socks too thin for winter and started gathering her toys. Silas's eyes caught the envelope on the counter. Red stamp, bold letters, final notice. Gideon saw Silas see it. His hand moved fast, too casual, snatching the envelope and shoving it into a drawer. "It's nothing," he said. It was everything. Silas didn't push. Not yet. Later, Maisie came out in pajamas, hair damp from a sink bath, cheeks pink from cold water. She hugged Silas tightly. Then she leaned close, voice dropping into a secret. "Uncle Silas, a man came and yelled at Daddy yesterday," she whispered. "He said if Daddy doesn't pay, we have to leave." Silas felt his stomach drop. He kept his face calm for her, crouching to her level like he'd learned to do. "Everything will be okay," he said softly. "I promise." Maisie searched his eyes like she could tell if promises were real. Then she nodded and shuffled off to her room. When Gideon returned to the living room, Silas was still standing in the same spot, the air around him sharpened. Gideon sighed like a man walking into a storm he didn't have energy for. "She told you?" "Yes," Silas said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's not your problem," Gideon snapped quietly. "I can handle it." Silas's voice rose before he could stop it. "How, with more odd jobs that wreck your back and still don't cover rent?" Gideon's face hardened, eyes flashing. "Don't come in here acting like you understand. You don't." Silas froze, then forced his tone lower. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't understand what it's like to be one missed payment away from losing your home." Gideon crossed his arms. "So don't fix it with your money." Silas stepped closer, careful. "It's not about money." Gideon's laugh was bitter. "That's easy for you to say." Silas inhaled, steadying himself, and said the sentence that would change the shape of their lives. "I want to offer you a job." Gideon blinked, thrown off balance. "A job? At your company?" "Yes." Gideon shook his head quickly. "I don't have a degree. I don't have corporate experience." "You have skill," Silas said. "You worked electronics. You fix things. You think. My IT team needs someone like you." Gideon's pride fought visibly with exhaustion. "And why?" Gideon asked, voice low. "Are you doing this?" Pity Silas shook his head. "No." He hesitated, then let the truth out like a wound. "Because you deserve stability. And because I need you too." Gideon stared, confused. "You need me," Silas's voice softened. "All my life I felt like something was missing. I built everything, money, power, control, and none of it filled the empty." He swallowed. "These dinners, these drawings, Maisie writing my name. It's the first time I've felt like I belong anywhere." Gideon's eyes shifted, his anger cracking. Silas held his gaze. "This isn't charity. It's a trade." Silence stretched. Then Gideon exhaled, long and shaky. "Okay," he whispered. "When would I start?" Monday came with a strange kind of fear. Not Silas's fear, the polished kind that lived behind negotiations and headlines. Gideon's fear, the kind that sat in your gut when you'd lived too long with doors closing in your face. Silas met him in the lobby of Crow Arcadia Systems before anyone else could. Gideon stood stiff in borrowed slacks and a cheap button-up collar, too tight shoulders, too broad for pretending. He looked like Silas in a costume that wasn't his. People stared. They tried not to. They failed. Two identical faces walking through a tower of glass and steel, one in tailored wealth, one in cautious survival. Whispers trailed behind them like smoke. Silas kept his stride even. "Ignore them," he said quietly. Gideon's jaw worked. "I'm used to people looking at me," he muttered. "Just not like this." In the elevator, Gideon stared at the reflective wall and flinched slightly at their doubled image. Silas saw it. "You don't have to become me," he said. "Just be you." Gideon's eyes flicked to him. "I don't even know who that is yet." Silas didn't answer because he understood that too well. On the IT floor, Silas introduced Gideon to the team with a voice that didn't invite debate. "This is Gideon Hart," Silas said. "He's joining us. He reports to me." A manager opened their mouth, then closed it. The CEO's tone was a locked door. Gideon nodded awkwardly, hands shoved into pockets like he was afraid they'd betray his nerves. Silas caught him before he could retreat into himself. "You're not here as a favor?" Silas said low. "You earned this." Gideon swallowed, then nodded once. "Okay." That night, Silas returned to the small apartment, expecting tension, expecting pride to rise again like a wall. Instead, Maisie barreled into him, screaming, "Daddy got a job." Gideon tried to look casual, but his eyes shone with something Silas rarely saw in grown men, relief so intense it almost looked like pain. Maisie presented a drawing like it was a trophy. 3 stick figures, one small in the middle holding hands with 2 identical tall ones, a heart over their heads. "Our family," Maisie announced, chest puffed out. "Me, Daddy, Uncle Silas." Silas's throat closed. He had seen family portraits in gold frames that cost more than this apartment. None of them had ever made his chest ache like this. "It's beautiful," he managed. Maisie beamed. "I made your hair fancy," she said seriously. "Because you're a fancy uncle." Gideon watched Silas carefully, like he was learning how to trust a man who could buy the world. Silas looked back at him, same eyes, different scars. And for the first time, Silas didn't feel like a man standing alone at the top of a tower. He felt like a brother. A week later, Gideon mentioned her in passing while rinsing a coffee cup. "My mom's been getting worse," he said, voice too casual. "Rose Delaney, heart issues." Silas looked up sharply. "Your adoptive mom?" Gideon nodded. "She raised me. She's everything." Silas heard the reverence in Gideon's voice and felt a strange jealousy, not of love, but of having grown up with it. "I want to meet her," Silas said. Gideon hesitated. "She's private." Silas softened his tone. "So am I. And yet here we are." Gideon exhaled. "Okay." Then after a beat, "But you should go alone." Silas frowned. Why, Gideon's eyes dropped. "Because she's mine," he said quietly. "And because this moment belongs to you." Silas didn't argue. He understood. Some doors you had to walk through by yourself. Rose Delaney's building was old, but her apartment smelled like soap and green life. Plants crowded every windowsill, ivy, succulents, herbs, in mismatched pots, like she'd been trying to grow a little hope into every corner. Silas raised his hand to knock. The door opened before his knuckles even landed. Rose Delaney stood there in a wool cardigan, despite mild weather gray hair, tied-back face, lined by years of work and worry, yet her eyes were alive, bright in a way money couldn't purchase. Her smile appeared and then disappeared. She stared at him like she'd seen a ghost step out of sunlight. "Oh," she breathed. One hand rose to her chest. "Oh my God," Silas swallowed. "Mrs. Delaney, I'm Silas Crow." Rose blinked rapidly, tears forming instantly. "Gideon told me you were coming," she whispered, voice shaking. "But I thought he was exaggerating." Silas offered a careful smile. "Apparently I'm hard to exaggerate." Rose let out a watery laugh that turned into a sob. "It's like looking at my boy in expensive clothes." Silas stepped inside, suddenly unsure how to stand in a room where love had lived. Rose guided him to a small living room, handmade cushions, a vase of wildflowers, an old tea set with one cup repaired by a thin line of glue. "I made tea," she said, hands trembling as she poured. Silas sat stiffly, accepting the cup like an offering. Rose didn't drink right away. She studied him, his face, his eyes, his posture, like she was reading a story she'd been waiting 34 years to finish. Then she said it, softly, like a truth she'd carried alone. "You have her eyes." Silas's heart stuttered. "Her," who Rose's gaze didn't move. "Your mother," she whispered. "Your real mother." The teacup trembled in Silas's hand, and the world leaned in, ready to finally confess. Silas set the cup down carefully, afraid his shaking would spill the last of his control. "My biological mother," he said, voice low. You knew her. Rose Delaney's eyes filled again. She nodded slowly as if nodding hurt. I knew her very well, she whispered. Silas's chest tightened. What was her name? Rose took a breath, then spoke like she was placing a stone on a grave. Luna Reyes. The name hit Silas with weight. Not because he recognized it, he didn't, but because it was the first real piece of him that wasn't bought, inherited, or polished. Luna. Silas repeated, testing the sound. Rose nodded. She was young, she said. 19. Too young to carry what she carried. Silas leaned forward. How did you know her? Rose's fingers gripped her cup. We worked in the same house, she said. No shame, just truth. As staff. Silas's breath caught, where Rose's eyes didn't flinch. At the Crow estate, she said quietly. Your adoptive parents' house. The room seemed to tilt. Silas stared, suddenly cold. She worked for them. Yes, Rose said. She tried to hide her pregnancy, for as long as she could. Silas's voice turned rough. Who was the father? Rose's mouth tightened with old anger. A gardener, she said. Miguel. He vanished when he found out. Silas felt something sharp move under his ribs, rage at a man he'd never meet. Rage at a world where people disappeared and left women to drown. And my adoptive parents, Silas asked. They knew. Rose nodded, jaw tight. Mrs. Crow suspected, she said. By the 8th month, it was impossible to hide. Luna was let go. Silas swallowed. What happened to her? Rose's eyes went distant as if she were watching the past through a cracked window. She came to live with me, Rose said softly. I had a tiny apartment, barely space for one person, but she had nowhere else. Silas's hands clenched. Then she gave birth, Rose said. Her voice shook now. To you. Silas inhaled sharply. Rose continued, tears spilling freely. To you. And another. Silas froze. Another. Rose nodded, crying openly now. Identical twins, she whispered. So small. So perfect. 2 boys with the same face. Silas's heart slammed against his ribs. He could barely get the words out. Gideon. Rose nodded. Yes, she whispered. Gideon. Silas stared at her, mind struggling to hold the cruelty of the math. Why split us? He breathed. Rose's voice broke. Because Luna was drowning, she said, and she couldn't save both babies at once. Silas's eyes burned. Rose wiped her cheeks with her sleeve like she didn't care how she looked. She knew the Crows. Rose whispered. She knew they had money, stability, she thought. If she left one of you there, he'd live. Silas's throat tightened painfully. The note, he whispered. Take good care of him. Rose nodded, sobbing. She wrote it, she said, with shaking hands. Silas stared at the woman who had carried his beginning in her chest for decades. And he realized his life wasn't just cracked. It had been split. Right down the middle. And the missing half had a name. Luna Reyes. And a brother. Gideon Hart. Silas didn't realize he was crying until warm wet hit his jaw. Rose Delaney watched him with that steady, mother-soft patience that didn't ask permission. She reached to a small dresser, opened a drawer, and pulled out a worn wooden box old enough to have absorbed decades of silence. This was Luna's, she said. Silas took it like it might shatter. The lid creaked. Inside, a small silver religious medal, dulled by time, a faded photograph of a young woman with dark hair and wide eyes, his eyes and a strip of embroidered fabric frayed at the edge like the last thread of a life. Silas's fingers hovered over the photo. She loved you, Rose whispered, in the only way she could. She thought leaving one of you at the Crow's door meant one of you would live. Silas swallowed hard. And Gideon, he stayed with you. Rose nodded. I promised her. I promised I'd keep him safe. Silas's voice cracked. Why didn't you tell him the truth? Rose's gaze fell. I told him he was adopted. I spared him the details. I didn't want him to carry the weight of being the one who stayed behind. She squeezed her cardigan at the chest, like it hurt to breathe. And now, I'm sick, Silas. Sicker than Gideon knows. I couldn't take these secrets with me. Silas stared at the photo again, chest tight with a rage so clean it scared him. Not rage at Rose. Rage at the world that let love die in a cheap apartment while luxury bloomed behind gates. He looked up. How long Rose's mouth trembled. Months. Maybe. Silas closed the box gently. Then his voice turned into a vow. Not anymore. Rose tried to protest. Oh, honey, no. I can't accept. It's not an offer, Silas interrupted, soft but unmovable. It's a promise. He stood pacing a tight line across the small living room, like he was trying to keep himself from breaking in half. The plants on the windowsill swayed slightly in a draft. Life still reaching. You raised Gideon, Silas said, voice thick. You did what my world would have called impossible. You kept him alive. Rose's eyes filled. He kept me alive, too. Silas's phone was already in his hand. One text to his private physician. One call to a specialist. The kind of calls his money made easy calls that felt disgusting now, because they shouldn't be easy only for him. Rose watched him, a tremor in her hands. Gideon's going to be angry. Silas nodded once. Let him be. Let him yell. Let him hate me for a minute. His jaw tightened. I can take it. I've taken comfort my whole life. I can finally take discomfort. Rose's lip quivered into a sad smile. You've got her heart, she whispered. Luna's. She was stubborn, too. Silas blinked hard. I don't know if I deserve any of this. Rose leaned forward, eyes sharp with truth. Deserve has nothing to do with it. Family is what you do when you're afraid, and you do it anyway. Silas held the wooden box against his chest, small, heavy, holy. When he reached the door, Rose called after him, voice barely louder than breath. Tell Gideon. She paused, tears spilling. Tell him she didn't stop loving him. She just ran out of ways to survive. Silas turned back, nodded, and left. Outside, Harbor Vale's sunlight felt harsh, but for the first time it didn't feel empty. Gideon didn't yell when Silas told him. Not at first. He went still, too still, like a man bracing for impact that finally arrived. Maisie sat on the rug, building a bottle-cap car, humming softly, unaware her whole origin story was being rewritten a few feet away. Luna Reyes, Gideon whispered. That's her name. Silas nodded. Rose knew her. She worked at the Crow estate. She had twins. Gideon's eyes glistened, anger and grief mixing into something sharp. So I'm the one she kept. Silas stepped closer. You're the one Rose kept safe. Gideon's voice broke. And you're the one she gave away. Maisie looked up, sensing the tension. Daddy Gideon forced a smile and opened his arms. Come here, Peanut. Maisie crawled into his lap. Gideon kissed the top of her head like he needed proof he could still protect something. Silas waited, letting Gideon breathe through the pain. Finally, Gideon spoke low and raw. I don't want your pity. Silas's throat tightened. It's not pity. Then what is it? Silas swallowed. It's me finally understanding why I've always felt like a copy missing the original. Gideon stared at him a long moment, then quietly, Okay. Don't stand above me. Stand beside me. Silas nodded. Always. Maisie's school uniform arrived in a plastic bag that looked too clean for her life. She held it up like it was a costume from a dream. Navy skirt, white shirt, little bow tie. The sleeves swallowed her arms. How do I look? She asked, spinning. Gideon's eyes shone with that proud father ache. Like a student, he said softly. Like you belong anywhere you walk into. Maisie's smile wobbled. What if the kids don't like me? Silas crouched to her level, steady and warm. Then they'll learn, he said. And if they're still mean, it says something about them. Not you. Maisie bit her lip. Do I have to tell them about before? Silas's chest tightened at the word. Before. The stoplight, the spray bottle, the French fry saved in a pocket like an emergency plan. No, Silas said gently. You don't owe your pain to anyone. Gideon checked the time, hands shaking slightly as he tied Maisie's bow. We're not late, he murmured mostly to himself. They drove in Gideon's modest new car, Silas's safety gift, that Gideon fought before finally accepting. The school gates rose like a different universe, red brick ironwork green lawns that looked unreal. Maisie gripped Gideon's hand so tight her knuckles went pale. I'll be here when you get out, Gideon promised. I swear. Maisie looked up at Silas. You too, Silas nodded. Front row. She took one breath, then walked in like a tiny soldier. Silas watched her disappear and felt his whole life tilt toward something that mattered. Pickup time felt like waiting for a verdict. Gideon's foot bounced on the car mat. Silas pretended he wasn't nervous, staring straight ahead like a man negotiating with fate. Then the front doors opened, and Maisie burst out smiling so hard it looked like sunlight. Daddy, Uncle Silas. She ran and leapt into Gideon's arms. School is amazing. There's a library bigger than our whole building and a playground with real swings and... She gasped for breath. And I made a friend? Her name's Tessa. Gideon laughed, breathy, relieved. You did? Maisie nodded fiercely. And the teacher says I have good handwriting. She dug into her backpack and pulled out a page. On it, in shaky cursive, was her name, Maisie Hart, the letters connected, like they were holding hands. Silas stared at it longer than he meant to. It wasn't just handwriting. It was proof that a child could be rewritten without being erased. You did that? Silas said quietly. Maisie beamed. I'm going to learn everything, she declared. Then she leaned in, whispering like a secret. So I can help people. Like you help us. Gideon's eyes met Silas's in the rearview mirror. Two identical men. Two different lives. One shared future, and in the back seat a little girl who didn't know she'd saved them both. The new house didn't feel new for long. Rose's plants claimed every sunny corner within a day. Gideon installed smart lights like he was stitching his old skills into a safer life. Maisie's drawings spread across the fridge and hallway walls like flags, bright proof that joy belonged here too. Silas brought almost nothing from his penthouse. A few books, a photo frame, the wooden box with Luna's face inside it. Because for the first time his possessions didn't feel like identity. The kitchen became the heart. Pancakes on Saturday mornings, Gideon making them into animals, while Maisie judged them like a food critic. Friday night movies with Maisie choosing and Silas pretending not to be offended by cartoons. Sunday board games where Rose destroyed them all with a grin that said she'd been waiting her whole life to win at something that mattered. One ordinary Sunday made extraordinary by all they'd survived. Rose set the table with mismatched dishes like a patchwork quilt. She raised her glass of tea. To family, she said. Gideon echoed it, voice rough with emotion. To family. Silas lifted his glass, last feeling the word finally fit. To family. Maisie reached out her hands, one to Gideon, one to Silas, and laced their fingers together as if she could physically keep them from ever being separated again. Now we're a real family, right? She asked. Silas looked at Gideon, same eyes, steadier now. Looked at Rose, tired heart, fierce love. Looked at Maisie, bright, brave, alive. And he answered without armor. Yes, Silas said, smiling through the burn in his throat. We are. And somewhere in the quiet after the universe finally stopped feeling like a thief, it started feeling like a second chance. Did this story touch your heart? Let us know how you felt. Rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments below if it moved. You please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss our next heartfelt story. Click the end screen to watch more emotional journeys. See you in the next one.